Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Śrīla Prabhupada. I'm very happy to be doing live sessions again. It's been quite some time that we had not given. So we are very much delighted to resume these classes. We would like to make them more regularly. So today we are going to be reading from this book, the 7th Gosvāmī. So a book about Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura that was compiled by Rupa Vilas Das, a disciple of Śrīla Prabhupada. It's a book that I've been wanting to read for many years and I have never done so. And I was thinking, why not read it with other devotees online and maybe discuss a little bit about it. So obviously this is going to be a series, a series of lectures or reading sessions that we're going to be having, since it's a book that's going to take, I would say, at least 5 sessions. There are some appendix at the end and excerpts from the books of Śrīla Prabhupada concerning Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura that we're not going to be reading in these sessions. We're simply going to be reading all the way to his predictions, so the predictions of Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. So basically his life, his character, his writings, his pastimes, like that, which means it's going to be about this portion of the book. So all of this here that constitutes the appendices and notes from Śrīla Prabhupada books and so on, we're not going to be touching this. So it's going to be focusing on his life and precepts in this way. So before starting, we will recite the Mangalachandana prayer to invoke auspiciousness, so that we can benefit from discussing the pastimes of a pure devotee, and that we can imbibe or receive a little bit of his mercy, so that we can progress in our spiritual lives. So I will be sharing the Mangalachandana prayer here. Om Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjala Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Śrī Caitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupaha Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunantam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Caitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shiveshakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvatī Deva Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Dishatarine Jai Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you all for joining. Thank you very much. In the introduction of this book, there is the Pranam mantra for Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, so we will be reciting this Pranam mantra a bit later on. So the 7th Gosvāmī, this book, we have the PDF version which we'll be sharing shortly. And so we thank the devotees who have compiled this book, Rupa Vilas Prabhu, and I believe there was other devotees also involved in this. 1989 it was compiled, so quite some time ago, dedicated to Srila Prabhupada. So this is the dedication from Rupa Vilas Prabhu. We'll be sharing the PDF. I'm just going to read from the book for now. So, to His Divine Grace, I see Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, my eternal spiritual master, who delivered the merciful teachings of the Vaishnava Acharyas to the suffering world. I pray that he may be a little pleased with this attempt to glorify Śrīla Saccīdananda Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Saccīdananda Namine Gaur Shakti Svarupaya Rupanugavarayate. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Saccīdananda Bhaktivinoda, who is transcendental energy of Caitanya Mahāprabhu. He is a strict follower of the Gosvāmīs headed by Śrīla Rupa. Without further ado, we will begin to read this book. So I'm going to try this this way here. You let me know if you appreciate this. Is it big enough? Let me know in the comment section. Like this you can see both I and the PDF file. Let me know if it's readable on your phones. So Hare Krishna, all the devotees who are joining us. This is probably Jani Prabhu or maybe Amori Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Vrindavaneshwari Mataji. Hare Krishna, Devash Patel, Dronacharan. Hare Krishna. So we will begin now. So let me know if that's big enough, if it's nice for you, comfortable for reading. So this book contains a prologue, family lineage of Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, his birth and infancy, schooling, marriage and studies in Kolkata, college, then Orissa, then his life as a deputy magistrate, preaching days begin, the Ṭhākur in Puri, the chastisement of Bishakishan, Vaishnava studies and 2 Mahatmas, some other pastimes, royal conspiracy, Krishna Samhita and other works, initiation and Srila Jagannath Das Babaji, Bhakti Bhavan, Bankim Chandra and a flow of books, discovery of Lord Śrī Caitanya's birth site, preaching the holy name, a mighty pen, retirement and expansion of preaching. His preaching reaches the Western world, preaching and publishing until the last, Bhakti Kuti and Svananda Sukhada Kunja, acceptance of Babaji Vesha, last days, summary of life and qualities, his daily schedule, his character, his writing, his predictions. And as I said, the appendices and glossary we're not going to be covering because it's quite voluminous. So please share in the groups, let the devotees know that the session has started. A biography of His Divine Grace Śrīla Saccīdananda Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura ki jai, by Rupa Vilas Das Adhikari, edited by Karnamrita Das Adhikari. I have not yet seen the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, but I consider you to be the 7th Goswami. So this was spoken by Shishir Kumar Ghosh at Amrita Bazar Patrika, editor and founder, in a letter to glorify Srila Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. So I believe that was the coined title as the 7th Goswami. I think it came from this. So dedication we have read just now. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Sachidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura ki jai. Preface. The efforts of Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura to re-establish the pure form of Gauḍīya Vaishnavism can be better appreciated if something is said about the prevailing and generally opposing currents of thought espoused by the ruling British, the Indian intellectuals of the time, and the common people of the 19th century India. The British, with some notable exceptions amongst their scholars, such as H. Wilson and Sir William Jones, viewed any native endeavor to uncover and extol the glories of their great heritage as undesirable and foolish at best. At worst, they piled abuse and invective on Vedic thought and scriptures in ill-conceived and misinformed attacks. In 1838, the year of Ṭhākur Bhaktivinoda's birth, there was some debate on India's supreme ruling council, chaired by Lord Bentinck, as to the value of teaching Sanskrit and India's classical literatures, as well as regional languages, in schools to be established by the British for the education of the Indian people. A few members of the council were mildly in favor of it, but the elegantly expressed, fully ethnocentric, I don't know if I'll be able to look up some words, ethnocentric, I'm sorry, I'd like to know what we were saying here. Evaluating other peoples and cultures according to the standards of one's own culture. Okay. I compare my culture, I see your culture from the viewpoint of mine. Ethnocentric and Philistine view of Thomas Macaulay prevailed. In his Education Minute, Macaulay wrote that he could not find one Orientalist who could deny that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India and Arabia. Just see how the British were so puffed up and proud, and this idea has not gone much. And the great work, the British work in India, Srila Prabhupada was saying, to basically make Indians ashamed of their own culture, which we're seeing that they've done actually a good job at their demonic work. He went on to make the outrageous assertion that all the historical information which has been collected from all the books written in the Sanskrit language is less valuable than what may be found in the most paltry abridgments used at preparatory schools in England. He's insulting all Vedic literatures, just see. All the work that Śrīla Vyasadeva has done is less than the, little ABC that the student in England used to study. What a foolish statement. What an ignorant man. He then made the following creatively express, though uneducated, assertion as his central statement of belief. The question now before us is simply whether, when it is in our power to teach the English language, we shall teach languages in which there are no books on any subject which deserve to be compared to our own. Whether, when we can patronize sound philosophy and true history, we shall countenance at the public expense medical doctrines which would disgrace an English farrier. So I'll have to farrier. A craftsman, a farrier. So it's a craftsman who trims and shoes horses. Just see. By teaching the history of India in the British-controlled India would disgrace even the horseshoe maker of England. Can you be more of a rude personality than this? Astronomy, which would more move laughter in girls at an English boarding schools, history abounding with kings 30 feet high and reigns of 30,000 years long, and a geography made up of seas of treacle and rivers of butter. Yeah, so it seems like he's seen the whole universe, you know. His statement on education, especially in connection with Sanskrit literature and regional languages, set the tone for British endeavors to educate the Indian natives thereafter. And he further declared, the great object of the British government ought to be the promotion of European literature and science among the natives of India. This sort of extreme religious and cultural chauvinism was not rare, and in fact it prevailed. The historian James Mill denigrated the Vedic scriptures and deities with phrases like grossest images of sensual pleasure, the worship of the emblems of generative organs, just like the Shiva Linga, and ascribed to God an immense train of obscene acts. He described the whole of Vaishnavism as something wild. H. Wilson, in response, made the following comments on Mill's historiography. Mill's view of Hindu religion is full of very serious defects, arising from inveterate prejudices and imperfect knowledge. Every text, every circumstance that makes against the Hindu character is most assiduously cited, and everything in its favor as carefully kept out of sight, whilst a total neglect is displayed of the history of Hindu belief. Wilson, being more liberal and much better informed, was appalled at Mill's presentation. Yet he was himself convinced of the basic thesis that Indian culture and religion was something inferior, albeit fascinating. Dr. Tytler wrote, the histories of Buddha, Salavahana, and Krishna comprise nothing more than perverted copies of Christianity. And the British missionaries were especially disturbed by the temple idols, particularly those at Jagannath Puri. George Gogerly, the historian, describes the reaction of Dr. Claudius Buchanan, one of the first British missionaries who arrived in Bengal in 1790, and described the horrors of Juggernaut. Juggernaut was generally referred to by the missionaries as that Indian Moloch. Gogerly wrote, the whole history of this famous god, Krishna, is one of lust, robbery, deceit, and murder. The history of the whole hierarchy of Hinduism is one of shameful iniquity, too vile to be described. Thus, with regard to the rulers of the day, their opinions were certainly not helpful towards a renaissance of Vaishnavism, nor supportive of the publication of its important literatures and the excellently articulated views of the propounders of Vaishnava thought. The situation was compounded in the course of time by Indian intellectuals who were trained in the school established by the British, and who tended to parrot all the criticisms of their schoolmasters and took it for granted that the Vedas and Puranas were at best a fascinating collection of mythological tales that have little to do with reality. This is unfortunately the main position of most so-called scholars in India now. They all think that the Puranas and so on are all mythology, even so-called Hindus. They also have that viewpoint, you know. So just see how tough of a time that Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura was in to preach. Even up to recently, Śrīla Prabhupada said also when he told one of his former friend that he wanted to open a temple in Vrindavan, the former friend said, Vrindavan, why there? That means that even when Prabhupada was there, Vrindavan was seen actually as a low-class place, you know. So how much work was needed to be done? If there was any substance in Indian philosophy, it was certainly not to be found in the histories and Puranas, but rather in the Upanishads, which, due to a certain degree of textual ambiguity, were easier to interpret from the impersonal viewpoint. Sometimes Indian reformers created elaborate fusions of Indian thought and the Christianity of their British conquerors. These they considered an improvement that could be more easily embraced by the so-called rational thinkers of the day. You see, so compromise, right? Try to make a bridge between Christianity and the Vedas in this way. ISKCON is sometimes criticized like that too. They say that we are trying to Christianize Hinduism because Srila Prabhupada's, let us know that Lord Jesus Christ is a pure devotee and so on. And that we promote one God. They say this monism, to say that there's only one God is a Christian idea. So they say that ISKCON is trying to push that. You see how ignorant they are. A clear example of this predilection is to be found in the ideas of Ram Mohan Ray, a famous Bengali philosopher who borrowed eclectically from the doctrines of a number of Western thinkers and from Christianity. He created a belief system he called Brahmoism. And he emphasized what he considered a rationalistic view of the Vedic scriptures. He rejected Gauḍīya Vaishnavism and was critical of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu. His countryman K.C. Mitter says of him, Ram Mohan tried to subvert Hinduism and disseminate purer and more elevated notions of religions and morality. Of course, the so-called purer and more elevated notions of Ram Mohan Ray were simply mental speculations of no particular redeeming value. And his misdirected efforts, along with those of other misled Indian thinkers, led to all kinds of foolish theories about Vedic culture and philosophy, which was excellent beyond any of their insignificant imaginings and ramblings. The ideas of Ram Mohan, however, became popular with young Bengal, which was steeped in the ways of the British, and Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura had to contend mightily with the awful effects of such theorizing, as will be documented in this volume. The last great obstacle confronted by the Ṭhākura was the widespread acceptance of the doctrines of the numerous Deviant Sahajiya, pseudo-devotee, groups which had sprung up after the disappearance of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu and his principal followers. There were a variety of spurious ideas and practices espoused by these groups, which did not create much in the way of regard in the minds of the Bengali thinkers of the day. Unfortunately, such groups were taught to represent standard Gauḍīya Vaishnavism. Some of them espoused very sentimental versions of Gauḍīya Vaishnava doctrines in which mundane physical sensuality amongst its members was equalized with the completely transcendental conjugal affairs of Radha Krishna. Some mixed Islam with Gauḍīya Vaishnavism. Some of them smoked ganja, had illicit sexual intercourse, took advantage of sentimental people for material gain, practiced tantric rituals. Well, we see all of this coming back. With all the problems that are rising in our movement at the moment, all of this is there. Etc. All this in the name of the pure doctrines of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu. What is more, a group of publishers called the Bharatalas, out of commercial motivation, popularized the apocryphal meaning of a story of statement of doubtful authenticity, although widely circulated as being true. Yeah, so something that is really widespread, but that has no basis in truth. Apocryphal literatures of many of these bogus groups by publishing and disseminating them wildly in the villages. It is estimated that between 1815 and 1899, more than 50 such works were published, and thus Sahajiya Vaishnavism and its rancid ideas became accepted as standard amongst the less educated masses in the villages. So Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura was running a magazine also, and he used to expose a lot of these works. What he would do is that whatever books were written about Vaishnavism, he would read it, and then he would write an article on it and spread wide. So in this way, he was exposing everything through his articles, which many have been kept. There's a good website called Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura Institute or Bhaktivinoda Institute that has a lot of such articles. Thus, the Ṭhākura had a great deal to contend with in his struggle to establish the pure and original teachings of Gauḍīya Vaishnavism. And yet, because of his journalistic attempt, especially through the very popular and widely read Vaishnava journal Sajjana Toshani, I had forgotten, so yeah, Sajjana Toshani is the name. His organization of door-to-door preaching in the villages, his publication of authentic philosophical works by the 6 Gosvāmīs and their followers, his discovery and establishment of Śrī Caitanya's birthplace as the principal place of pilgrimage in all of Bengal, and his instructing and educating many followers, including his son, Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Sarasvatī Ṭhākur, who successfully disseminated his father's mission all over India and other parts of the world. He was enormously successful. In Dr. Ramakanta Chakravarti's book, Vaishnavism in Bengal, 1486 to 1900, he frankly admits Vaishnava journalism as well as Gauḍīya Vaishnava organization in Bengal really became meaningful under the guidance of a dynamic Vaishnava deputy magistrate named Kedaranath Dutt Bhaktivinoda, 1838-1914. He goes on to relate a little of the Ṭhākur's history, which is more elaborately detailed in the succeeding pages of this book. In his youth, he came into close contact with Vijendranath Tagore, 1840-1926, eldest son of Devendranath Tagore. With Vijendranath, Kedarnath assiduously studied Western philosophy and history. Later, he initiated the study of comparative philosophy in the light of Gauḍīya Vaishnava theology. When he was a deputy magistrate in Puri, Kedarnath caused the incarceration of a man named Visakhi Sen, who was the leader of the heretical Ativadi sect. Kedarnath first published the famous Vaishnava journal Sajjana Toshani in 1885. In 1885, he founded the Vaishnava society named Vaishnava Sabha, and also set up the depository press in 181 Maniktala Street, Kolkata. The Vaishnava Sabha appointed 3 Gauḍīya Vaishnava preachers named Bipin Bihari Goswami, Mahendranath Goswami, and Harigopal Goswami. They were to work in districts of Bengal. So I think that's the end of the quote from that book that this gentleman had written. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur's son, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākur, was also responsible for the printing of many authoritative Vaishnava tomes and was famous for confrontations with the thinkers of the day, in which he was repeatedly successful in altering their stereotypical conceptions of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu's sublime philosophy. The result was a newly won respect for the brilliant doctrine of Lord Chaitanya and his followers, the 6 Goswāmīs, a new pride in the culture and tradition of Gauḍīya Vaishnavism, and a serious interest among the educated classes in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. As a result of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākur's inspired efforts, many educated and qualified men came forward and assisted him in spreading the mission of Ṭhākur Bhaktivinoda all over India and other parts of India, and even into Europe, eventually establishing 64 matas or temples. One of his disciples, the most eminent Mahabhagavata Śrīla A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, was actually successful in spreading the profoundly mystical message of Lord Chaitanya all over the known world, establishing more than 100 temples, farms, schools, and institutes, thus instrumentally fulfilling the most ardent desires of Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur. So that was the introduction. So we can see that it's actually possible that if we fight and if we expose all the deviations, that's why we have really to get to the work of exposing all the deviations that are taking place in Hinduism and actually everything all over the world. Just today I was watching, there was, you probably know Elon Musk, right? So he had a talk with a philosopher from Canada called Jordan Peterson. That was maybe 3-4 days ago, and it was recorded. So I've watched it in segment, and today I finished it. And these men, we had practically speaking the most famous, let's say, scientist, businessman of the day, Elon Musk, and one of the rising personality in the field of philosophy and sociology and psychology and so on. And so these are 2 of the top personalities on our planet now, and they don't know, they just don't know. But whatever they speak of, we have the answer. Because of Srila Prabhupada's knowledge, we can actually give the answer to what they have. So we have to make like huge propaganda. That's why we have to present every big topic that is there in the news or science or whatever it is. We have to make videos and try to widespread. It's possible to change the mind. Actually, many people are joining this movement by reading Srila Prabhupada books, and even though they might have belonged to some of these groups who believe that, you know, India is a Puranas are all mythology and this and that, and India needs technology, this kind of mentality, or those who think that Radha Krishna pastimes are just some lustful affairs. So we can change their mind, but we have to preach, we have to preach. Prologue. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura appeared in the 19th century at a critical historical juncture, when the teachings of Lord Chaitanya had been so much disparaged. I'm sorry, I'm not an educated fella. Well, I cannot even find this word in the dictionary. Maybe because it's not... you can type, let me know if you... Okay, BND. Okay, I have. Regard or represent as being of little worth. Okay, so, undermining, right? And deprecated that the Ṭhākur, despite 8 years of inquiry and endeavor, was unable to secure a copy of Śrī Caitanya Charitamrita. Wow. After 8 years he was trying to get the CC. Just see. Wow. Then it was so hard to get the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And us, we have it and we're not reading it. Srila Prabhupada has made it available in so many languages, he's printed it. All you need to do is to go online, order it, and get to it, and people are not reading it. We take it for granted. The most important biographical work on the philosophy and life of Lord Chaitanya. Even in manuscript form, Lord Chaitanya's pure teachings had been virtually lost, though only a few hundred years had elapsed since his disappearance. These teachings were preserved solely by a handful of reclusive renunciates, who were not actively preaching his message, except by their living example. So, Bhajananandi and Goshtayanandi. So, one will sit down and take care of his own self and perform bhajan, and the other will go out and preach. So, Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura appeared to be the only preacher of his time that was actually trying to spread the message of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu. Although the Ṭhākura is especially noted for his having rediscovered the site of Lord Chaitanya's birth, in fact, he practically rediscovered and re-established Lord Chaitanya's movement, which was obscured by the cultural and religious chauvinism of the rulish British, and discredited by the preserved and useless activities of a number of Sahaja deviant sects and other groups with motivated, concocted philosophies. Yes, so Britishers, Sahajas, and we haven't come to the caste Brahmins yet. He revived Lord Chaitanya's message, published the writings of the Gosvāmīs, Lord Chaitanya's principal apostles, and proved the timeless importance and relevance of these teachings to the modern world. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura's life can easily be... Okay, I'd like to know, anybody says that can it be read properly? Can read, Prabhuji. Okay, Mataji is saying can read. Alright. Just give me a second here. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura's life can easily be misrepresented and misunderstood if subjected to a mundane scholarly approach. At the outset, he appears to be a typical Bengali intellectual, a product of the British educational system and Kolkata literary scene, and a student of European philosophers. Yes, and even now he is misunderstood for works like From Moses to Mahaprabhu. You know, he wrote an article From Moses to Mahaprabhu where he explains how Moses was situated in Shantaras, and then Lord Jesus Christ brought another rasa in this way. And modern day Hindus would be are mostly against that, you know, because they think that anything that has to do with any of the personality of the Western world is some Christianity brainwashed thing. They don't have a wide vision of God consciousness, you know. Hinduism, you know, only in India. And 19th century Kolkata was the epicenter of the cultural, literary and religious life of India. The Ṭhākur appears in the midst of the spirit of historic ferment in the guise of a typical British-educated Bengali Babu. He seems to dabble in various philosophies and to eventually take up the study of Krishna consciousness out of intellectual curiosity. Yes, before starting to study Krishna consciousness, actually, Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur was attracted to the teachings of Lord Jesus Christ. But then, in one of his articles, he writes, but then I came upon the fairy tale of Adam and Eve and so on, you know. So he's saying that this is some bogus story like that. So he was attracted to the teachings of Lord Jesus Christ for some time. He then appeared to have been transformed by spiritual association into a hardened apologist of Gauḍīya Vaishnavism in reaction to its misrepresentation by others, both foreign and native, and to take up the propagation of Krishna consciousness, gradually achieving a state of elevated spiritual consciousness. Of course, from an external point of view, he gradually come to this point, but a pure devotee is not under the three modes in any stages of his life, even though he appears to have, you know, a gradual development of Krishna consciousness. It's not like that. It's the same thing as Arjuna being bewildered on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. We cannot say that he was and then he became, you know, they are nitya siddha. They have nothing to do with the three modes. Although this view of Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura is superficial and far removed from a true understanding of his spiritual significance, it may nevertheless appear to have some merit. Ultimately it does not, but unfortunately some scholars present him in just such a superficial and uncomprehending manner. In writing a biography about Srila Ramananda Rai, the intimate associate of Lord Chaitanya, Srila Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākur cautions the reader in the beginning. This brochure is not to be considered as a hagiological literature dealing with the lives and legends of saints. So basically, more as a legend. Hagiological attend but an endeavor for inculcating a procedure of following the life of a transcendental devotee who had a thoroughly peculiar mood of service of the Absolute, unknown to the vitiated mundane atmosphere. Basically, we're not just speaking about the life of a pure Vaishnava just to give you some information about what he did, and you know, no, it's to help you follow in his footsteps. Readers are respectfully solicited to go through these pages not with a challenging mood but with an approaching aptitude, to be acquainted with the undiscovered track of devotion. A submissive and attentive audiencing will surely facilitate comprehension of the transcendental procedure, aiding one's journey to his hitherto. This is what happened when we read from Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī. Hitherto, until now or until the point in time under discussion, aiding one's journey to his hitherto unexplored transcendence. The absolute must not be obliged to come under finitudinal. Means finitude, okay, finite, right? Examination by our poor senses. Having opened like this, he nevertheless tried to accommodate readers heavily conditioned by a tendency to view the life of a self-realized soul in an empiric way. That's it. So not simply analyze, oh, he did like this, then he wrote this work, but no. It's not, we're not actually reading this just to get information like ABC like they do, right? They study history books and all just to, oh, this happened on that year, this happened on that year. No, to discuss the pastime of a pure devotee is the same as discussing the pastime of the Lord. No? So satatam kirtayanto mam yatam tischa drida namasentascha mam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha. Srila Sarasvatī Ṭhākur wrote a whole chapter called The Lord and His Beloved, viewed by empiricists, which he concludes by saying, this is a short narrative of the Supreme Lord and Rai Ramananda, as gauged by mundane spectators known as hagiolators, who search about the accounts of heroes. His next chapter takes the reader to unexplored regions of the profoundest depth and has the same title as above, but this time it is subtitled Viewed by Devotees, in which he begins, we have surveyed in the last chapter the seeming conception of worldly people about Rai Ramananda. Now we are to enlighten those who are interested in the esoteric aspect of the devotee. Savants of the spiritual manifestations do not corroborate the view of the ordinary observer of mundane phenomena. Conception is carried both in worldly phenomena as well as in transcendental manifestive aspects. So this is the external activities of the devotees that can appear mundane, and the actual pure spiritual identity and activities that a pure devotee carries out, which are cannot be understood unless it's revealed by another devotee. A stricter caution may not be neglected in distinguishing the two different planes so as to rescue the true view from confusion. So it is said in the CC that the pure devotee has got two lives going on parallel. So one is his external behavior and one is within. He's always serving Krishna in his eternal Svarupa, within himself. It is the purpose of this biography to keep uppermost the true view of the Ṭhākur as a fully spiritual personality, despite whatever deluding appearances, external details, or ordinary observers may attempt to establish. The spiritual plane is real and eternal. The material plane is unreal, being temporary. When a spiritual personality comes to the material world for the salvation of others, there is bound to be bewilderment on the part of those whose vision remains clouded by the material world as to who and what he is. So that is not just to apply to outsiders, it's an instruction for us also. A reminder to be extremely careful when discussing the activities of a pure devotee. Thus, to rescue the true view from confusion, we must know that Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura is Nitya-siddha, an eternally realized associate of the Supreme Lord, who descended from the spiritual world to assist Lord Chaitanya in establishing his mission. Whatever external appearances, forms and figures are present in his life, he was never a conditioned soul of this world. This assurance we have from our acharyas. He was a member of Krishna's inner circle in Goloka Vrindavan, the supreme spiritual planet of the spiritual world, and he has come to rescue us from confusion. The inner life of a Nitya-siddha devotee can never be fully understood, but the aim of a biographical work of this sort is to attempt to delve into the inner life and mood of a great soul, so as to afford inspiration and direction to those who have set out or are yet to set out on the path back to Godhead, life's only truly great journey. The inner life of a Mahatma can be traced out, especially in his writings, in which his personal ecstasies are revealed, so far as words can describe them. Well, yeah, revealed, I mean, he writes down his spiritual emotions, but as far as us realizing them, that is only through his mercy. It's not simply by reading. This was especially true in the case of Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, who left detailed descriptions of the spiritual process and his personal experience of the transcendental reality himself, Śrī Krishna. Great souls may exhibit ordinary seeming activities, but they are not to be misunderstood because of this. In the process of attempting to appreciate the Thakur's inner life, we must simultaneously note the recorded movements of these great souls' course through the world, which can also help us to gain understanding. The activities and words of such persons do not simply exhibit a temporary significance, but rather instruct us eternally. As the Ṭhākur himself has written in the Bhagavat regarding Vyas and other great sages, so this is Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur who wrote, these great souls were not mere luminaries like comets appearing in the firmament for a while and disappearing as soon as their mission was done. They are like so many suns shining all along to give light and heat to the succeeding generations. Nevertheless, the Ṭhākur himself called matter the dictionary of spirit. So a good deal can also be comprehended from the trajectory of his observed and recorded activities and deeds, which included tremendous efforts to communicate Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu's message by book and magazine publication, personal door-to-door preaching, and his many public addresses and lectures. Yeah, so of course that the activities of a Mahabhagavata are definitely beneficial for us, because he comes down to the second platform to show us how we should behave. His preaching work and all, these are all activities of a Madhyamadikari. The Uttamadikari does not preach because he thinks everybody else more elevated than he. So therefore he has to come and accept the position of a Madhyam. That doesn't mean he becomes a Madhyama. It just means that he accepts the discrimination of a Madhyamadikari and the activities of a Madhyamadikari. This is described in the Nectar of Instruction, right? As well as in the 11th canto of Bhagavatam. By carefully hearing from both worlds his philosophical and revelatory writings, by which he lives eternally in sound, as well as the historical details of his activities described by the various hagiographers, we can hope to gain a glimpse into his transcendental life. Furthermore, by thus hearing about him and from him, we may realize the greatest boon of human existence, association with a pure devotee, as Paramahamsa of the highest order, one who was justly honored as the seventh Gosvāmī due to his writings and spiritual realization being of equal stature to that of the six Goswamis of Vrindavan, the principal disciples of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu. Srila Prabhupada commented on the importance of not misunderstanding the life of the Ṭhākura in a letter to Madhusudan Prabhu written on November 20th, 1968. Regarding your questions, I read in a book sent from India that Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura was sent directly by Lord Śrī Caitanya from the spiritual sky. I am not sure if the book was bona fide. Is the above true? Someone, a god brother, mentioned that he heard that Śrīla Bhaktivinoda was at one time an impersonalist. Was he ever? Yes, what you have heard is all right. Just like Arjuna is the constant companion of Krishna, as it is confirmed in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says that both Arjuna and he appeared many times on this world, but he had forgotten his past appearance and Krishna did not. Krishna is like the sun, and Maya is just like darkness. When Krishna is present, there cannot be any darkness of Maya. So although Arjuna was always in the presence of Krishna, as an eternal companion in friendship, still he had some illusion in the battlefield of Kurukshetra, and Krishna had to disseminate that darkness by the teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So this is very, this topic of pure devotee becoming bewildered. Srila Prabhupada clearly explained that this is made by the internal potency of the Lord, just like Brahma became bewildered by seeing all the Vishnu forms, you know. And Prabhupada explained that this is for the further advancement of the devotee. Now, all I'm saying, I could show the quotes, I could take the time, but I don't want to be, interrupting always by showing quotes and all. I might show a few, but I'm just speaking like that so that we can proceed faster. The purport is, sometimes even a liberated person like Arjuna plays the part of a conditioned soul in order to play some important part. Similarly, Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura was for some time associating with the impersonalists, and then he exhibited himself in his true color as pure devotee, exactly in the same way as Arjuna exhibited himself in the beginning as a conditioned soul, and then as a liberated soul. So there is nothing to be misunderstood in this connection. Krishna and his devotees sometimes play like that, as much as Lord Buddha, although an incarnation of Krishna, preached the philosophy of voidism. These things are conducted in terms of place, audience, time, etc. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that the activities of the Vaishnava cannot be understood even by the greatest scholar. Yeah. And even the activities of the Lord, of course. Recently I was asked that why did Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu take sannyas from a Mayavad sannyasi? So from a purely historical point of view, there's many people in India that say, you see, Chaitanya Mahāprabhu actually belonged to the Sankaracharya Sampradayas. So why did Chaitanya Mahāprabhu do that? Actually, Prabhupada explains in the purport of the CC that he did that in order to convert the impersonalists to Vaishnavism. Him himself having been a so-called impersonalist in the line of Sankaracharya, and then taking to the saṅkīrtana movement, you know, and we can see that he converted great impersonalists like a Prakashan, the Sarasvatī, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, like that, you know. So we have to understand everything through the transparent via medium of the spiritual master. There is no doubt about it that Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura is an eternal energy of Lord Śrī Krishna Chaitanya Mahāprabhu. And whatever he did was just to suit the time, place, circumstances, etc. There's no contradiction in his activities. Gaura Shakti Svarupaya. So an eternal energy. So energy, you know, this is, these eternally liberated souls are not like us, you know, who have fallen. And here he is described as Shakti, energy. He's not described as a Jiva, you know. I cannot say much about that, but I'm just pointing out. Therefore, it is described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 23.39, Yana Chitta Krishna Prema Karaya Uddaya, Tanra Vakya Kriya Mudra Vigaya Na Bhujaya. Even the most learned men cannot understand the words, activities, and symptoms of a person situated in love of God. Yeah, actually, that's a verse I was, yesterday I wanted to search. I was looking for it. And somehow I couldn't find it. And here it is. So I'll just be saving it very quickly so that it'll be easier for me later. Okay, it is not at all possible by any process of scholarship or review of a devotee's biographical facts and figures to understand the nature of one who is situated in love of Godhead. When Lord Chaitanya described the glories of Mukunda, the royal physician, he also confirmed this point. Mukunda was sitting with the Mohammedan king on a high platform, and the servant of the king brought a peacock fan and held it over the king's head to shade him from the sun. Mukunda became absorbed in ecstatic love of Godhead merely by seeing the fan, which invoked his remembrance of Lord Krishna. He fell unconscious from the platform. When the concerned sovereign questioned Mukunda as to why he had suddenly fallen, Mukunda claimed to be afflicted with a form of epilepsy. But the king, being perceptive in spiritual matters, began to glimpse the actual glory of Mukunda. Lord Chaitanya Mahāprabhu declared, Bahya Raja Vaidya in ho kare Raja Seva, Antara Krishna Prema in hara jani beka keba. Mukunda Das externally appears to be a royal physician engaged in governmental service, but internally he has a deep love for Krishna. Who can understand his love? Srila Prabhupada comments, unless Śrī Krishna Caitanya Mahāprabhu discloses the fact, no one can understand who is actually a great devotee of the Lord, engaged in his service. It is therefore said in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya 23.39, Tanra Vaki Kriya Mudra Vigneya Na Bujhaya. That's the verse we just saw. Even the most perfect and learned scholar cannot understand a Vaishnava's activities. A Vaishnava may be engaged in governmental service or in a professional business so that externally one cannot understand his position. Internally, however, he may be a Nitya Siddha Vaishnava, that is, an eternally liberated Vaishnava. Externally, Mukunda Das was a royal physician, but internally he was the most liberated Paramahamsa devotee. Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu knew this very well, but ordinary men could not understand it, for the activities and plans of a Vaishnava cannot be understood by ordinary men. So now we have the CC, we read, oh yes, Mukunda Das, of course, Mukunda Das is a pure devotee, we know. But at the time he was conceived, he was covered. He was not revealed as a Paramahamsa, but Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu made sure that his devotee be glorified. And thus he revealed his spiritual identity, or actually his spiritual platform. Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu knew this very well, but ordinary men could not understand it, for the activities and plans of a Vaishnava cannot be understood by ordinary men. However, Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu and his representatives understand everything about the devotee, even though the devotee may externally pretend to be an ordinary householder and a professional businessman. Pundarika Vidyanidhi also concealed himself in the guise of a worldly enjoyer, and so expertly that only Mukunda, Vasudeva Datta, and Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu understood his actual position. I think Pundarika Vidyanidhi was the devotee who was who was dressed, in very costly garment. He had so much rings, gold, and all, if I'm not mistaken. Gadadhar Pandit was very dear to Mukunda, and so Mukunda told him to come with him to meet a very exalted devotee. Gadadhar agreed, but was surprised to see, upon meeting Pundarika Vidyanidhi, that he was living in tremendous opulence. He beheld him lying on a couch being fanned by servants and smeared with perfume. In short, living in the style of a sense enjoyer or extravagant prince. Gadadhar experienced some doubts on seeing all of this. Just see, Gadadhar was having doubt about the spiritual positions. How are we going to be understanding? Then Mukunda, following the movement of Gadadhar's mind, sang some verses about Krishna's merciful treatment of the Putana witch, who came to kill Krishna with her poison-smeared breast, but was compassionately given the position of his mother in the spiritual world. Immediately upon hearing these verses, Pundarika Vidyanidhi underwent a radical transformation and began to exhibit all of the ecstatic symptoms of love of Godhead simultaneously. He cried out, "Say more, say more!" fell to the floor and began to thrash around in the grip of spiritual emotion, breaking all of the room's furnishings to pieces in a helpless state of extreme ecstasy. 10 men tried to hold him down so that he would not be injured, but it was useless. Finally, after some time, he recovered and was pacified. Gadadhar then realized that he had disrespected a great devotee in his mind and commented, "I was heading into a critically dangerous position, but as you have brought me here today, I have been able to avoid that pitfall." Seeing Śrī Vidyanidhi dressed as a sense enjoyer, I suppose that he was a materialistic devotee. But you were able to understand my mind, and therefore you so kindly caused his devotion to dawn. just as the sun rises in the east in the morning. As long as I continue to make mistakes, you should always remain diligent in pointing out to me the errors in my thinking. All those who take up this path of devotion accept a spiritual guide, but I have not as yet accepted anyone as my preceptor. I should get myself initiated by this personality. If I can do that, then the fault of whatever contempt I felt will be reduced. Thus the true glories of the Vaishnavas may not easily be known, but by the grace of a pure Vaishnava or the Lord himself, their glories can be revealed. Although Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura appeared to be no more than a magistrate with a large family and many material concerns, he produced over 100 books explaining the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya and the Gosvāmīs in the greatest depth. And in his songs and poems, he described his state of ecstatic emotion and realization, which the Acharyas in our line have confirmed to be pure expressions of the highest understanding of love of Godhead, and none different from the vibration of Vedic literature. Furthermore, by his practical life's demonstration, he exhibited his true feeling for the Lord by engaging 24 hours a day in his service, striving with his whole being to deliver the message of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu for the benefit of the suffering world. He was successful in re-establishing the purity of the teachings of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu, sending the Lord's teachings to the West for the first time and having as his son the greatest Paramahamsa Srila Bhaktisiddhānta Sarasvatī Ṭhākur, who expanded his mission to an unprecedented degree. He can be said to be mainly, even solely, responsible for the revival of the Krishna consciousness movement in its original form and the most important Vaishnava philosopher in the history of Gauḍīya Vaishnavism since the time of Srila Baladeva Vidyabhushana, who composed Govinda Bhashya, the authoritative Gauḍīya Vaishnava commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. So we need to understand also that the devotee who has compiled this book, who has written this book, what was it? 1989. He had to go. Why he's speaking about not misunderstanding the external activities of a Ṭhākur? Because he had to go through many of the mundane works that were written about Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur from a purely so-called scholarly perspective, you see. And therefore he had to see a lot of that stuff. He had to read a lot of this, you know. And so he's made, my take on it is that he also wanted to clear that off maybe of his mind, you know, and continue properly. Because I know that while doing research, if we want to present a work about the Vaishnava philosophy, we might sometimes have to read from non-pure devotees' work, and that can be effective to the mind. I personally experienced that when I did the video on Dr. Zakir Naik. I had to research a lot in the Upanishads and so on, and it was sometimes very disturbing to the mind, you know. So I think there's this one reason for his own protection that devotee wrote this, and also if anyone who's not already a devotee comes to read this book, then there's this introduction here. And of course as a reminder for ourselves too. 8 o'clock. Okay, we continue. Family lineage. If you have any comments or questions, you can write. And maybe we'll have a short question and answer session at the end. Family lineage. Śrīla Saccīdānanda Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura was born on September 2nd, 1838, on Sunday, in the ancient village of Birnagar, Ulagram or Ula, located in the Nadia district of West Bengal. He was the third son of Ananda Chandra Datta and Jagat Mohini Devi. It can be said that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, as both his mother and father came from illustrious and wealthy families. However, he suffered great miseries and trials throughout his youth. He was given the name of Kedarnath, a name of Lord Shiva, by his father. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura wrote a book in 1876 called Dattavamshamala, in which he detailed the genealogy of his father's family line. He also explains in his autobiography, "I was born a descendant of Purushottama Datta and Kanya Kubja Kayastha, among the 5 Kayasthas who came to the Gauḍa region at the invitation of King Adisura, namely Makarananda Ghosh, Dasaratha Vasu, Kalidas Mitra, Dasaratha Guha, and Purushottama Datta. Sri Purushottama Datta was the foremost. His community was settled at Baligram. Later on, some individual in his lineage settled in Andulagram and became known as the chief of all the Kayastha community. Also in his line was Raja Krishnananda Datta, the father of the great Vaishnava Acharya Nartam Das Ṭhākur. Oh. So also in his line was, so he's in some way related to Nartam Das Ṭhākur by blood. And a great devotee, or by lineage at least. And a great devotee of Lord Nityananda, and who often received the Lord in his home. Kedaranath was thus later called the 7th son of Raja Krishnananda. Raja Krishnananda's grandson was Govinda Sharan Datta. The Sultan of Delhi once gave Govinda Sharan some land on the banks of the Ganges in West Bengal. On that land, Govinda Sharan established the town of Govindapur. This town was later joined with 2 neighboring towns, Kalighat and Sutanuti, to form the city now known as Kolkata. I just see. Oh. So this Govinda Sharan Datta was given a land that became a town known as Govindapur, which later became Kolkata. And this Govinda Sharan Datta here is the grandson of Raja Krishnananda, and Raja Krishnananda was considered Kedaranath as being his 7th son. So very great families. So Govindapur, and it merged with 2 towns, Kalighat and Sutanuti, and later it became Kolkata. So Kolkata was the merging of Govindapur, Kalighat and Sutanuti. A city of tremendous importance to the British Empire. Yes, Kolkata was the, Prabhupada was saying, it was like the British jewel. When the British built Fort William at Govindapur, Govinda Sharan and his family were given land in exchange, and the Datta family moved to Hatkola, where they began a settlement and became known as the Hatkola Dattas. Govinda Sharan's grandson was Ramachandra Datta, whose son Krishna Chandra was a great Vaishnava. Krishna Chandra's son was the famous Vaishnava Madan Mohan Datta. Madan Mohan Datta, who was a contemporary of Lord Clive, and a merchant and zamindar in Kolkata. He was famous in Bengal for constructing 395 stone steps at Prishtasila Hill at Gaya. Maybe some of you know of this. Where the impression of the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu are enshrined at the cost of hundreds of thousands of rupees, so that the pilgrims could climb the sacred hill. Interesting, I had never heard of this place. You can maybe note it down. So 395 stone step, Prishtasila Hill at Gaya, where the impression of Lord Vishnu's lotus feet is. The lotus feet of the Lord at Gaya were the meeting place of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu and Ishvarapuri, and where Lord Chaitanya's experienced deep ecstasy after seeing the Lord's feet. So not only, now we know of that, but it's part of the pastime of Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu. Another thing, sometimes, in India, there are some places where some people might have cheated the public just to make money and say that it's a holy place or something like that, But when we have confirmation like that from the Lord's pastimes or from the pure devotee, it's reassuring. Then whatever lack is just our lack of devotion. Okay. Lord explained deep ecstasy after seeing the Lord's feet. Madan Mohan's son was Ram Dattu Datta, and his son was Raja Vallabha Datta, the paternal grandfather of Kedaranath. He possessed mystic powers and could foretell the future. In his autobiography, Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura describes his father and mother in the following manner. My father, Ananda Chandra Datta Mahasaya, was very religious, straightforward and detached from sensual things. Regarding his beauty, many people used to say that in Kolkata there was no one at that time who was as handsome. My mother was called Śrīmati Jagat Mohini. She was possessed of intellect, straightforwardness and devotion to my father. It can be said that there was no one like her. His mother was the daughter of Isvara Chandra Mitra Mustaupi, a descendant of the noble Rameswara Mitra Mustaupi family. Her father was a man of immense wealth and generous disposition. As a generous zamindar, zamindars were prominent landholders who often had the power, wealth and prestige of kings. As zamindar of the West Bengal district of Nadia, he was held next in esteem to the king of Nadia. Very, very exalted family, both spiritually and from material standpoint. Kedaranath's paternal grandmother was the daughter of Rai Rayan, Jagannath Prasad Ghosh, who owned property in the district of Kuttak, in the state of Orissa. The village known as Choti Govindapur, situated on the bank of the Virupa river, as well as other villages, were their family property. However, Kedaranath's paternal grandmother and grandfather were living in Kolkata at the time of Rai Rayan's death, and the property fell into the hands of Rai Rayan's chief servant, named Ramahari, who took possession of everything. Therefore, Kedaranath's paternal grandfather and grandmother, who were destitute in Calcutta, went there to reclaim their property, but the rascal Ramahari would not give it up. A servant who stole the property of the master. A lawsuit was started, and Ananda Chandra, at the request of his father, went to Orissa to settle the case, which took almost 3 years. When his paternal grandfather and grandmother moved from Calcutta to Orissa, Ananda Chandra and Jagat Mohini went to her ancestral home, taking Abhaya Kali, their firstborn, with them. So, Bhaktivinoda Thakur's eldest brother. Shortly after arrival, the second son, Kali Prasanna, was born, and then Ananda Chandra went to Orissa to help his father secure the ancestral lands. So great lineage. Therefore, Prabhupada often in his lectures says that this Vaishnavism is not for the poor, Of course, everybody can go to Krishna, but the point is that there was this great understanding that people were becoming devotees because they were like some low-class people, and they wanted to live out of begging and so on. But you can see the 6 Gosvāmīs, many of them were very, very big men. Same things with Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. Birth and infancy. Yes, so there is this, because it's related to this context, there's this verse that I'll just read out loud from the Uttarakanda of, I guess Uttarakanda, Padma Purana, I guess. No, sorry. Okay. The two different translations. I'll read the one that is from Chaitanya Bhagavata, Antyakanda 8.175 and 176. Just as Lakshmana, Bharat and Sankarshana take birth with the Lord, the Yadava cowherd people descending from their spiritual planet by the Lord's will take birth with the appearance of Lord Krishna and then return to his eternal dham along with him. The birth of these devotees is not caused by bondage to karma. Just as Bharat and Lakshman, the son of Sumitra, and just as Sankarshana and other forms of the Supreme Lord appear in this world by their own will, similarly the Vaishnava associates of the Lord appear with the Lord and then return to the Lord's eternal abode with the Lord. Like the Lord, the Vaishnavas do not take birth according to their past karma. So, this is not a normal birth. He came with a mission. During the time his father was away, Kedaranath was born in Birnagar, Ulagram or Ula. So his father was away trying to get the ancestral land, right? At the time of his birth, an astrologer sat marking the time with an hourglass, and an English account of the time was also kept. Kedarnath was born in the time of the British East India Company's ascendancy. The last powerful Muslim ruler, Shah Alam, had lived only to see the troops of the British East India Company march into Delhi in 1803. In the first half of the 19th century, a number of wars of conquest were waged by the British. The Marathas, who had previously become very powerful under their king, Shivaji is a very famous personality, I believe, in India. All of you who are from India must know about Shivaji. Were crushed in, become very powerful under the king of Shivaji, were crushed in 3 grueling wars. Their confederacy was thus broken, and with it any hopes for self-rule, by 1818. From 1818 to 1857, during the time, Kedarnath came to age and was educated. The British fought a number of wars of annexation, and by 1857, almost 2/3 of the subcontinent had fallen to them. Bengal, and especially Kolkata, was a hub of the East India Company's trading operation. Kedarnath's maternal grandfather, an aristocratic landholder, was fabulously wealthy. So maternal grandfather. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura describes in his autobiography, "My maternal grandfather had incomparable wealth and a grand estate. There were hundreds of male and female servants. When I was born, I was a good weight. I had an older brother, Abhaya Kali, who had previously died, and a second brother, Kariprasanna, who was still living. I was my father's 3rd son. It was said that of all my brothers, I was a little ugly. But my mother said, 'Very well, let this boy be the servant of the rest. Just let him live a long time.' My mother told me that when I was 8 months old, I got a boil on my thigh, and as a result, I became weak and emaciated. I also heard that while I was being carried in the arms of my nurse, Shibu, down a flight of stairs, I cut my tongue on my teeth. To this day, I have a scar on my tongue. This happened around the time my teeth were coming in. When the boy was almost 2 years old, his father returned from Orissa. It took a long time, huh? So he left before the birth, born 2 years, then the father comes back. His father came back. His nurse later told him that a few days before his return, the boy saw a crow flying to a perch, and he composed a rhyme. Kal kal jingera pol, baba aseta nade baso. O crow, kal, flower of the jinga squash, father comes, sit aside. 2 years old, and he's composing such a nice rhyme. As he spoke, the crow changed his position. Some people nearby noticed this and said, "Oh, your father must certainly be coming soon." His father arrived a few days later. You see, pastimes of the little baby pure devotees. Schooling. Kedarnath's first school was on the Vedanta of his maternal grandfather's puja building. Sorry, veranda, not Vedanta. Veranda means a very big balcony, right? Building where many of the village boys used to gather for their education. The teacher was very forbidding, and the boys were afraid of him. The Ṭhākura says of this, "I have some recollection of going to a school run by Kartika Sarkara when I was 3 years old. Even now it comes to mind that cane he used to show." There were many festive occasions observed in the house of his grandfather, especially Durga or Jagadhatri Puja, which was performed with great pomp. His mother's side of the family were mostly Shaktas, worshippers of Durga. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura recalls, hundreds of chandeliers would hang on the puja house. Lanterns would be wrapped around all the pillars and columns. All the guards at the doors would be dressed in sepoy uniforms. Numerous stout men dressed in golden embroidered clothes would come from Ranaghat and Shantipura. Many bodyguards and soldiers used to accompany all these men. In terms of people, the scene was like a forest of humanity, and in terms of lights, it was like the battle of Kurukshetra. Just see the opulence in which he was born. This kind of descriptions, it really remind us of the Vedic times, and this is not long ago, some 200 years ago or so. The scene was filled with fireworks and rowdy pomp. Late at night, there would be kavigana, singing of poetic compositions. At dawn, I would listen, but the kaviwalas, the reciters, would scream so loudly that it would hurt my ears. I can remember that we used to have 25 or 30 brahmanas from West Bengal come and carry the goddess to the place of worship and perform the worship. It's funny why I laughed just now is because such exalted culture, poetic reciters and so on, and he's saying it's hurting my ears. And here I'm in a village, and we sometimes in the evening time you get all these aunties that gather and put this loud folklore Chinese music, and it's really loud, and you can see the difference of standard, such an exalted culture there, and here I am in a country where the culture is so low, and there's loud people everywhere. On the sixth day, so the goddess, I believe this is, he was speaking of Durga Puja, right? On the sixth day, 2 types of drums would be beaten and the sound would shake to the whole puja house. On the 9th day, many goats and buffalo would be sacrificially killed. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura observed with sardonic humor, everybody used to enjoy this occasion, except the goats and the buffalo. Most of the brahmanas and panditas used to come solely for the taste of mutton. He continues, during Dole Yatra, another annual festival, there was singing and various kinds of sport. So much red dye was thrown about that everything appeared to be blood-colored. At this time, even the gods took part in the festivities. They would enter the temple courtyard singing and throwing dye. Because of all their commotion, I would stay a little distance away from them. I would enjoy watching the festival bonfire. Such colorful festival. When he was 5 years old, he began his schooling, but the school was run by a cruel teacher who instituted a system of punishments utilizing older students, which kept the younger boys terrorized. Those who were a little older used to act as agents of the teacher and would harass the younger among us. If we came late to school, these older boys would apprehend us. The rule was, whoever came to school first was hit with the stick once. That was the use of hurrying up. Whoever came second was hit twice. Okay, I get it. And whoever was third was hit 3 times, and the number kept increasing in this way. The routing was as follows. The youngest students used to write their kagagas, ABCs, on talpata with black coal. After a year, they would write their numbers on banana leaves, and after that, they made a copy on paper. All the older boys were taught accounting, which was the work of the office of the zamindar. From time to time, under the scrutiny of the teacher, we would learn the deliberation of a court. The youngest boys would lodge a complaint, and their witnesses and evidence would be deliberated upon as in a court. In the end, there would be the determination of punishment. All the decisions of the court had to be confirmed by the teacher. Quite a strict teacher. There were different kinds of punishments: twisting of ears, slapping, caning, and paying a fine. We saw our teacher as the personification of Yama, the judge of the dead. And the older student used to act on behalf of the teacher, as if agents of Yama, Yamadutas. Sometimes these older students would act on their own, and sometimes they would arrange a court on behalf of the teacher. Some boys would make false complaints and bring false witnesses to court, and other boys would administer punishment. Geez, what kind of school is this, It's very bad to give this kind of a mentality to the older boys that they can do what they want with the youngest. At one point, being intimidated by the older boys, Kedaranath stole some jackfruit from his home for his teacher. His mother, however, found out and became very angry. When my teacher heard about this, he became frightened. He said that I should only take things that would not be noticed. Don't bring big things. The neighbors' children used to steal tobacco and give it to him. I used to steal soaked chickpeas and give them to him instead. Kedaranath's brother Haridas, who also attended the school, eventually became so furious with the teacher and the boldness of the older boys that he took up a machete and entered the men's home while he slept. Wow, he got fed up, huh? So we can see that there's some boiling blood in the family. I think this is a younger brother of Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, because the name is not the same as the two older brothers that we heard before, and one of them died also, right? Haridas, yeah, must be a younger brother. Quite a powerful boy. Kedaranath, who chanced to be present, took the machete from him and threw it away. The teacher immediately resigned and departed that very day, and another teacher replaced him. That was efficient. Up to the end of his 6th year, he attended this Bengali medium school, where he studied as follows. We would begin in the morning by standing and loudly reciting the multiplication tables, addition tables, ganda tables, kauri tables, and so on. So reciting out loud math, and I believe the alphabet, and maybe the linking of letters. I'm just guessing this is what it means. Yeah? The older students would recite in a loud chorus. First, the older students would together say, First, the older students would together say, 4 kauris make 1 ganda. Then we in the younger students group would immediately respond, 4 kauris make 1 ganda. The recitation would proceed in this matter. When it was finished, we would sit down and write it all out. As we wrote, our teacher would often declare, say it, then write it. We would repeat a word in a loud voice and then write it. In the resulting tumult, no one could understand anyone else. Then an English school opened in his maternal grandfather's home. So the very wealthy man, right? Which was started by his grandmother. Okay. So the grandmother in the father's house, in her husband's house, opened a school. So the grandparents' mother's side of Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. An Indianized Frenchman named Dijor Barret began to give Kedaranath, his elder brother Kariprasana, and some of the other boys English lessons, and a nice relationship developed between Kedaranath and his teacher. During his playtime, he sometimes wandered in his grandfather's gardens and picked ripe mangoes or caught caterpillars of various kinds, which his father used to raise by feeding them appropriate leaves, eventually releasing them as butterflies. There were many beehives in the gardens, and the boys used to break the hives and steal the honey. They're bold, huh? My son, he wouldn't even get near the beehives. You see how boys were raised in those days. There was a little bit of roughness in the education and the whole play, and they were much more bold and adventurous. Kedaranath used to show some restraint in his honey eating, but his brothers did not. Their mother used to feel their bodies to see if they were unusually warm from eating honey, and if so, they would be punished. Can't hide. The Ṭhākur recalls, one day the honey bees stung us. My older brother, Kariprasana, was an innocent fellow, but the bees stung him so much that he had a fever for several days. His brothers were so rambunctious, which means informal, uncontrollably exuberant, that they were not satisfied to simply play in their grandfather's grounds. They used to venture out and get into trouble. Kedaranath used to sit and talk with the gatekeepers to avoid getting into difficulty with his brothers. The soldiers used to tell him stories and recite the Ramayana, to which Kedaranath was very much attracted, and he began to recite the stories to his mother and maidservant. His mother was pleased and sent some gifts to the gatekeepers. In return, Srital Theoyari, the main storyteller, would share his rotis, flat breads, dal, bean soup, and khichari, a combination of dal and rice, with Kedaranath. And Kedaranath would become very happy. These incidents serves to show how Kedaranath was attracted to hearing about Ram and Krishna from the very beginning of his life, in preference to the playful sports of his brothers. Yeah, so his brothers were very mischievous, right? They would go out and he was like, well, I'll get into trouble with them. Better hear Ramayana from the, the gods. This is the feature in the lives of great souls, as evidenced, of course, we know he's attracted to Krishna, so he goes where Krishna is, right? As evidenced were the histories of others like Maharaj Parikshit, Prahlad Maharaj, Uddhava, Narottam Das Ṭhākur, etc., whose childhoods are described in the pages of the scriptures. Their primary attraction was to God and was exhibited from the very beginning of their lives. Sometimes the boy used to wake up at night and talk to the night gods of the inner grounds, particularly one called Officer Naf, who was very old but still used to carry his lantern, stick, club, and sword. Officer Naf was a much trusted god of Kedaranath's grandfather. He was fearless and a former dacoit, robber. Kedaranath used to ask him many questions. When Naf was a dacoit, he had accidentally beheaded his own guru during a raid. You see the kind of story that was there, this were not like the times where now, why they needed gods and all. There was still some small wars going on here and there between Britishers, dacoits, Indians who wanted to liberate India from the British rule, all of that, It's quite intense. So he beheaded his own guru during a raid. Since that time he had constantly chanted the holy name of Hari. Although only 6 or 7 and incapable of understanding all of Naf's amazing stories, Kedaranath liked to hear him talk. Not the least of his attractions must have been the almost constant vibration of the holy name issuing from his mouth. Since Kedaranath's mother was the daughter of a very wealthy man and was thus unable to tolerate much physical labor, a maidservant named Shibu took care of Kedaranath most of the time. She was completely dedicated to the brothers, even more than to her own children. In the morning time, she would serve us a light breakfast and then take us to school. Later in the day, she would bring us rice to eat. At noon, she would find us wherever we were and supervise us while we took milk. In the evening, she would take us home and put us to bed and lay down herself with us. She would give up her own happiness for our happiness. Even if her own daughter wanted to take her home, she would be reluctant to leave. Very faithful maid. There were doctors in residence who used to prepare various Ayurvedic medicines for Kedaranath's family members, as well as training students who came to them to study the science. Ayurveda and astrology, these two sciences were especially known by Brahmanas for a specific reason, because most people are concerned with the welfare of their body and their lives. So Ayurveda, I want to be healthy to enjoy my senses, and astrology, I want to know what's coming up, Would I be wealthy? Should I marry this girl? This and that. So Brahmanas used to study these two sciences so that people would come to them, and then under the plea of helping them materially, would also teach transcendental knowledge. Okay, where were we? So those doctors that were in the residence, you can see it's a big residence. You have doctors, you have guards, you have nurses. So sometimes some students used to come. It must be a very lively scene, You grew up in such environment, you're very cultured. They made various medicines with herbs as well as special potent formulas which involved the difficult processing of burning gold, oxidizing iron, and grinding precious stones. Now, who does that these days? Science is particularly lost almost. Sometimes in the late afternoon, Kedaranath sat in his father's parlor and told stories to him or heard stories from him. At the time of evening prayers, his father would give him sandesh, a milk sweet. Most of the time, though, he stayed with his older brother Kali. His younger brother, Gauridas, The other one we read was Haridas, right? The one who took the chopper and wanted to kill the strict. So now we have Gauḍīya also. So another older brother, Kali, and Gauḍīya. I'm not sure how many brothers there were. So Gauḍīya, who was very beautiful, was extremely naughty and always in trouble. On certain festival days, buffalo-elephant fights were staged. Wow. Huge buffaloes had their horns tipped with iron, and the elephant's tusks were similarly tipped. And then they were set loose to fight. Whoa. Wow, what kind of entertainment is this? You see, like this desire to see like violence has always been there. Now we have like this boxings and this and that. You know, they will kill millions of cows in their slaughterhouses, but they will say, no, we cannot show like animal fights, live stream this or show it. No, it's animal cruelty. Let's just see the hypocrisy. Even in Krishna's time, right? Krishna himself, he subjugated, seven bull, right? He killed an elephant, Kuvalayapida, right? Bhima, when he was hiding into his last year of exile, he fought with so many lions barehanded and things like that. People like to see these things. And, you know, that's not that long ago. So Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura saw this. An elephant with, you know, iron tusk fighting a buffalo. Sometimes the buffaloes would win and sometimes the elephants. On other days, the boys would ride atop their personal elephant named Shiv Chandra, who would carry them to the places of entertainments during festivals. What a amazing childhood. During this period, his maternal grandfather was so wealthy that anyone in need could come to him for their necessities. The village was a very happy place, and no one lacked anything. Hardly a day passed without some festival taking place. In those days, Ula was free from suffering. There were 1,400 good Brahmana families. 1,400. And there were many Kayastha and Vaidya families too. So maybe some of you must know which these are names for Vaishyas maybe, or Kshatriyas. No one in the village went without food. One could get by with very little in those days. Everybody was cheerful people, used to sing, make music, and tell entertaining stories. You could not count how many jolly, fat-bellied brahmanas there were. Almost everybody had a good wit, could speak sweetly, and was skilled in making judgments. Everyone was skilled in the fine arts, song, and music. Groups of people could be heard at all times making music and singing, playing dice and chess. If anybody was in need, they could go to the home of Mushtaupi Mahashaya, his maternal grandfather, and get whatever they required without any difficulty. Life was good, you know. Was the need of all the cinemas and restaurants and brothel hotels, and when you have such a festive village full of life. Medicine, oil, and ghee were plentiful. The good people of Ulagram did not know the need of finding work in order to eat. What a happy time it was. When Kedaranath was 7, the king of Krishnanagar established a college and invited prominent landholders and neighboring kings to send their sons. Kedaranath's Kariprasana, his elder brother, and other boys from their family attended. Their nursemaid accompanied them, and they lived in a house in the midst of the bazaar at Krishnanagar. Next door to them lived an oil-press man who was about to die. He had arranged for the daily recitation of Mahabharata. Kedaranatha very much liked to hear the stories from the Mahabharata, and the stories about Bhima especially attracted his mind. He humorously observed, on certain days, the speaker would get a lot of things to eat, and on those days, he would be most eloquent. On those days when he received nothing, his heart would be very depressed. On Saturdays, the boys would be brought home to Ula by palanquin at great speed and happily spend the weekends with their families. Classes at the college were held at the official residence of the district magistrates, and an Englishman named Captain Richardson was the college principal. The son of the king of Krishnanagar, Bahadur Satish Chandra, was Kedaranath's classmate. So the son of the king was a classmate of Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. Kedaranath excelled in English studies and received a class promotion and an award for his scholarship. And that's much better than getting a slap if you arrive the first and 2 slaps if you arrive second. After this, he was greatly praised all over Ula, especially by his father and maternal grandfather, as well as his mother and other family members. Even his former English teacher, the Frenchman, came for a visit and praised him greatly. Finally, Kedaranath's father put a stop to his being praised in the presence of others. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura observed, "Hearing all this praise, my pride became much inflated in my mind. The importance of my reading and writing very soon amounted to nothing." You just see he had a very caring father also who was very much observant of his son's psychic, right? How the mind of a child develops. That's important for a father to observe and to know how I have to rectify my son now. Kedaranath's class performance fell off. The teachers began to chastise him, and the envious students gave him a hard time. He felt tormented and could no longer study. Instead of attending classes, Kedaranath used to hide in the woods or pretend to be ill. His nanny was no longer present, due to the boys having adjusted well to living in Krishnanagar. But one of their servants, a man named Keshi, understood his mind and took his side. Then one day the boys ate some impure foodstuff prepared by a well-meaning relative. Later that night, Kedaranath's elder brother, Kariprasana, became ill with cholera. A local doctor declared it very serious, and Kedaranath and Kalidatta set out for their home by palanquin. Kalidatta was sinking gradually into the illness. As we crossed the river Anjana, okay, now this is from the autobiography. As we crossed the river Anjana, I made a strenuous effort to pacify his mind. By 8 o'clock the following morning, the palanquin arrived at Ula. An hour after arriving home, the boy left this world, and a great cry of grief went up from the woman of the house. Wow. That's the second brother he lost. After several days, it was decided that Kedaranath would remain at home, which was to his satisfaction. At this time, he was about 8 years old. All of this happened in his life, and he's only 8. And he went for some months without schooling. Soon, however, some respectable men organized an English school in Ula, in the parlor of Kedaranath's uncle's house. Okay, so again, now it's an Englishman again. And again, in the parlor of Kedaranath's uncle. Okay, now it's uncle's house, no longer the maternal grandfather. The boy soon regained his aptitude and proficiency in studying, and his teachers showed him much affection. He used to play cricket, but after being struck on the brow with a bat and bleeding profusely, he gave it up and never played again. Yeah. He excelled in reading and reciting and learned Bengali and mathematics as well. Kedaranath's maternal uncle died, and after that many inauspicious things began to happen to his maternal grandfather. So a maternal uncle died. So the son of his maternal grandfather, who's very rich, that son died. And then many things began to happen to the wealthy grandfather. Numerous expenses came. Swindlers took advantage of the elderly gentleman's generosity, and he fell into debt. All of his sons had died, and he was given the bad advice that he should marry again and try to produce an heir. But there was no result in the union. So he did follow the advice. Somehow he maintained his status despite heavy debt. However, the elephant Shiva Chandra died. The horse was sold, the horse carriage also, and only a goat cart remained. The Durga festivals could only be celebrated by taking out loans. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura recalls the recitation of Mahabharata and Ramayana at the festivals. When there was recitations of the Mahabharata, Ramayana, etc., at the old house I would go to hear. I like to hear about Hanuman crossing the ocean to Lanka and about the demoness Simhika. Seems like all children really like to hear about Hanuman and Bhima, right? He said that he really liked to hear about Bhima also. Two great devotees who served the Lord with their might. The honorable reader would speak with specific accompanying gestures, and in my mind a great love would arise. I would make a regular habit of going to hear the reading after school. Again, we can observe the boy's strong spontaneous attraction for hearing the Lord's activities in lieu of the usual attraction to childish sports and playing. In his 8th year, Kedaranath's 2 younger brothers, Haridas and Gauridas, successively died. In his 8th year, that means when he was 8 years old, again, but 8 years old, he had just lost his older brother. So 4 of them died now. Can you imagine that? How the parents must have felt losing 4 sons. His mother and father experienced deep grief and suffering on this account. That left only Kedaranath and his younger sisters, Hemlata. Okay, so there were 5 boys and 1 girl. So now 4 of them died. So his 2 younger brothers, so that's the Haridas and Gauridas, right? Haridas was the bold one. But the younger, I mean, that means they were 7 or 6 or 5, like that. Wow. That left only Kedaranath and his younger sisters, Hemlata. Their nanny went everywhere with Hemlata on her hip and holding Kedaranath by the hand. His mother was so worried that none of her children would survive that she put many talismans around the necks of the children. Yeah, by that point you start to think that you're cursed, you know, that somehow from a previous life you've been cursed that your children are all gonna die or something. Whew. Kedaranath was very attracted to any kind of religious festivals or puja that was being performed. If he heard of one, he would arrange to go and see it. He occasionally visited the brahmachari who performed worship according to the doctrine of Tantra, sorcery. The brahmachari had cups made from skulls which were kept hidden in a small room in his house. Some people said that if you gave Ganges water and milk to a skull, it would smile. I tried to observe this and thus gave water and milk to a skull, but I saw nothing. Playing with skulls, you know, what a childhood. Another person who lived in the same area used to sing devotional songs. During the Durga festivals, Kedaranath would visit the houses of the Brahmanas to get prasadam. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura recalls, sometimes in the hope of getting some nice prasad, I would accept an invitation to eat. In some homes, I would get good dal, along with vegetables, curry and rice. In other homes, I would get khichdi and dal cooked with jackfruit and other things. Dal cooked with jackfruit. Oh yeah, jackfruit can be... Raw jackfruit is very nice, you know. I mean, of course, cooked raw jackfruit. At the age of 9, Kedaranath went to Jagat Bhattacharya to learn astrology. So he learned astrology. His cousin, Kailash Datta, also tried to learn. Kedaranath took notes with care and committed to memory whatever he was taught. On both the paternal and maternal sides of the family, fortunes declined. His paternal grandfather's residence was mortgaged, and other property was lost. The Kedaranath's father tried to help by securing property for his father in Kolkata, but his father refused to accept it, being very firmly resolved to stay in Orissa. Ananda Chandra, I think this is the maternal grandfather, right? Ananda Chandra then tried to secure land for his immediate family, seeing the failing fortunes of both his father-in-law and father. Okay, who is Ananda Chandra? I've lost track here. Oh, it's the father of Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, right? Because here, Kedarnath's father tried, to help secure property for his father in Kolkata, but his father refused to accept it. Whereas Ananda then tried to secure land for his immediate family, seeing the failing fortune of both his father-in-law and father. Yeah, so Ananda Chandra is the father of Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. And he got an offer to make managerial responsibility for some property from Mr. David Farland, a friend of his father-in-law's. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura observes. Okay, so Mr. David Farland is a friend of the father-in-law of Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, which means the wealthy father of his mother, right? Who lost his property. I mean, who indebted himself, he lost the elephant and so on. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura observes, a man's thoughts alone produce no result. Only what God desires can endure. Ananda Chandra went to see Mr. Farland's land. In the meantime, upon the death of Ananda Chandra's stepmother, Rani Radharani, so stepmother, not mother-in-law, stepmother. That means his Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura's father had two wives. In the meantime, upon the death of Ananda Chandra's Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura's fathers had two wives, maybe, right? Stepmother. Rani Radharani. Ananda Chandra inherited 6 rent-free villages in Orissa. 6 villages, not bad. A family, so this is Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura's father now, who inherited these villages. A family friend, Uma Chandra Vishwas, set out for Ula to report this news. 2 or 3 days after Ananda Chandra's return to Ula, after seeing the land of Mr. Farnan, he came down with severe fever. The best medicines available were administered. Nothing worked. Kedarnath was constantly by his father's side. One night while Kedarnath slept, his father gave up his life and was taken to the bank of the Ganges at Shantipur. Wow. He lost 4 brothers, now he's losing his father. What kind of faith you must have to go through all this? Shh. That's why you cannot understand the life of pure devotees, You're like, what is Krishna putting these devotees through? Wow. Same thing with Prabhupada. 15 years old, he lost his father. 30 years old, he lost it. 15, I think he lost his mother. And 30 years old, he lost his father. So, I see many of you are leaving. We started the class with about 15 people. Now only 6 of you are here. Oh, 5 of you. Never mind. I mean, I'm reading. Anybody that wants to hear along, you're welcome. The house was filled with lamentation. When I rose at dawn, I could not see father. There was no one around. At that time, Lalu Chakravarti and Parameshvara Mahanti had come from Orissa, and they had carried my father to the bank of the Ganges. Seeing everybody crying, I also began to cry. My honorable mother, being in anxiety, was weeping, and many people were trying to console her. Loud sounds of crying filled the house. My honorable grandfather closed the door. Can you imagine what his mother went through? Losing 4 sons and then the father. Lord. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura recalls, even while father was living, I began to become a little thoughtful. What is this world? Who are we? No doubt, you're such a young boy and so much is happening to you. These 2 questions were in my mind when I was 10 years old. On some days I thought I had the answers, and on other days I had none. One day in the evening, as the moon was rising, while I was wandering about on the roof of my father's parlor, I noticed that the moon was moving with me. It's funny because Prabhupada says the same thing. I think most children, they think like that, right? I thought this must be the same moon that we saw in Krishna Nagar, and that this small disk exists everywhere in the same fashion. I previously thought that in different places there was a different moon. But now, seeing the moon move, I concluded that it was the same moon everywhere. I would read the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Kali Purana, Anandamangala, etc. from Bengali manuscripts and imbibed much lore in this way. I would discuss these edifying subjects with whomever I met who was a little learned. This scrutinizing mood reminds one of Maharaj Parikshit. So now this is the devotee who is speaking, who examined everything around him after emerging from the womb as he looked for Krishna, whom he had seen there. We will observe that Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura had this same searching mood as a boy, and he was never satisfied in that search until years later. The Śrīmad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita finally came into his hands. At that time the object of his search was found, and his true devotional glories became fully manifested. A learned man named Vachaspati Mahasaya would often talk to Kedaranath about spiritual topics and told him that there was no talk between the demigods and mankind in Kali Yuga. One day, when the boy went to eat star apples in the garden near the parlor of his grandfather, he became frightened due to fear of a ghost that was reputed to stay there. Vachaspati Mahasaya described the forms of ghosts to him in some detail. So this is the same one. So describe the Vachaspati Mahasaya described the form of the ghost to him in some detail, and the boy became more frightened. However, he also had a strong desire to eat the star apples. He then spoke to the mother of a friend who was reputed to be expert in the occult, and she told him that there is no fear of ghosts as long as one chants the name of Ram. By way of an experiment, the boy went to the orchard, constantly calling out the name of Ram. He then became convinced in his heart that chanting the name of Ram was protection against ghosts. See how the Lord is, because it's the pure devotee is not like the Lord all-pervasive, all-knowing. He can be all-knowing by the grace of Krishna, but he's there, and Krishna is making all these arrangements to slowly bring him to the platform that he actually is, which is a Mahabhagavat. So you see how detachment from the world, he lost 4 brothers, he lost his father, and how he loved hearing Ramayana and Mahabharata. Now he's chanting the holy name of Ram. You can see how Krishna is always involved. From that time on, he was not afraid to go out at dusk, and when he did, he constantly chanted the holy name of Ram. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura recalls, "At dusk, I would always utter the name of Ram. When walking about the streets and alleys, I always chanted the name of Ram. I obtained such great satisfaction in my mind from this, that for many days afterwards, I took this medicine against ghosts. I heard that a ghost lived in the Homa, sacrificial fire building. Uttering the name of Ram, I chased the ghost away." Kedaranath had an elderly friend who was a sculptor who made backdrops of the goddess Durga. He told the boy that he had no confidence in anyone but Parameshvara, the Supreme Controller. And Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura remarks, "I had faith in the words of this old man." Becoming more inquisitive, he questioned a Mohammedan god who gave him a very imaginative explanation of the creation, but confirmed that the holy name of God is the remedy for ghosts. Kedaranath was thinking in philosophical terms almost constantly. He recalls, "There were many thoughts in my mind. At one time I thought that this world was false, that the Lord alone was real, and that I appeared to be the Lord." That I appeared to be the Lord. And I just see, so some sort of Mayavadi's conceptions were in his mind. It's very bewildering that a pure devotee is allowed by the Lord to have such thoughts, Just like Srila Prabhupada joined the Gandhi movement, he was a nationalist. It's very, that's why better not comment, just see it all as an arrangement of the Lord. His uncle's father was His uncle's father was an eclectic worshipper who in the morning would first study Vedanta, then recite the Kalma like a Muslim, and then pray to God as a Christian. He gave Kedaranath the idea that God alone was the Supreme Person, that the Vedas know him as Brahman, the Quran as Allah, and in the Bible he is called God. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura states, I believed him. But later he remarked, I was greatly confused. I was young and sensitive and had many questions. Seeing all this difference of opinion, my mind was not happy. His uncle, Parashuram, told him, Oh Baba, everything comes from nature, and that is God. There is nothing separate from nature. So, nature worshipper. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, because all the conclusions were uncertain, I never gave up the name of Ram, which warded off the fear of ghosts. Kedaranath was 11 years old at the time of his father's death. It was a very disturbing time for him, with uncertainty in all directions. He continued his studies, but his heart was not in it. He began to secretly drink castor oil to make himself sick, so that he wouldn't have to go to school, and he would often get fevers. He continued to think in a very philosophical way and wrote a poem called Ula Chandi Mahatmya, about the deity of Ula, Durga, a book which, according to the Ṭhākura, no longer exists. So 11, his father passed away. When he was 8, 3 of his brothers passed away, and earlier in his life another brother also. So much to endure for a poor little boy like this. Okay, so we'll see if we continue. Marriage and studies in Kolkata. Let's see how long that is. This is page 29. Okay. We're 2 hours in. I think we can finish this section. Let me see if there's some questions. Accordingly, we'll see. We're so taught for preaching of Krishna and Śrīla Bhaktivinoda. Okay. So, concerning this, Mataji, actually I'll do more than 2 days a week. I will try to finish them as fast as possible. At least this 7 Gosvāmī book. I'm thinking of doing tomorrow. The only thing is that tomorrow evening there will be the live stream of the class in Singapore. It's the Sunday feast day. They normally live stream the class. I'll see. Yeah. So, ASK Emile de la Réunion, Hare Krishna Prabhu. I guess, is this Jani Prabhu or is this Amari Prabhu? Let me know. Okay, so we'll continue. We'll at least finish this. It's just 2-3 page. Easy. Very, very nice, huh? Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. I did not know all of this. Normally we only hear Bishakishan, right? Okay, Jani Prabhu, he's asking, can we read that alone? Yes, of course you can read it alone. Actually, I always wanted to read that by myself, and I thought, why not just read with others? Now we are a small, intimate group, only 7 of you here. So, I enjoy. Okay, let's continue. Marriage and studies in Kolkata. Upon his reaching the age of 12, I'll try to read with the lower tones. Somehow or other, I always read with a higher tone than my normal voice. Upon his reaching the age of 12, his mother arranged a marriage with a 5-year-old girl from Ranaghat named Shayamani, the daughter of Sri Yukta Madhusudana Mitra. She hoped to improve the family fortunes by this arrangement. Childhood marriages were not uncommon at that time in Bengal. Such marriages were generally arranged by astrological calculation so that the partners would be compatible, and the couple usually came from similar family backgrounds. Yes, and I'm a strong supporter of this, and that should be revived in our Krishna consciousness movement. This is it's a great science. We've given 3 classes of Śrī-dharma where we've mentioned a lot about that. And this child marriage has to be slowly revived, at least within our ISKCON. I don't see any good arguments. Simply external pressure, right? Family pressure, social pressure. Well, we have to learn to give up all of that and re-begin that, because when they're married that young, it is so strong. There's no question of leaving, no question, and that makes society very steady. And there's so many other good results from that. Anyway, of course, in those days and environment, 5-year-old girl could get married. I don't think we can maybe bring it to that low, but at least 12 years old, like that, we should try. I will definitely try my best with my daughter. I usually come from families. The psychological reasoning behind these early marriages was that the girl in Vedic culture could feel secure knowing that her future was arranged and her protection guaranteed. The couple did not generally live together until they reached adulthood. A grand wedding was held, which Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura compares to a child's doll marriage. Yeah, I guess, right? You got children marrying, well, they don't understand much. There was a pleasure boat, a wedding palanquin, decoration, lights, English music, etc. The marriage took place between a 12-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl, and was exactly like a child's doll marriage. Drinking Ganges water and milk, I arrived at the house of my father-in-law with a great festive crowd. The reception was huge. Okay, so the boy goes to the house. It's always like this. Even here in China, that's a tradition. The boy goes to the house of the girl, I think most countries like that. The reception was huge. Many gentlemen of the teli, oil caste, I just see, there's a caste even for oil, like Shudra, like we say Shudras, right? But those of you who are in India probably know that there's so many different castes of Shudras. There's a family that deals with oil, and a family that deals with shoe making, family, Teli, so oil caste, dressed in bright and varied clothes and wearing jari outfits, came to the reception. Even though I was of such a tender age, I was able to understand that except for the Kayasthas and the Brahmanas, who were dressed nicely, the good clothes and ornaments did not look well on the others. Two reciters of genealogies read out the family histories of the Mitra and Datta families, and the marriage was gradually concluded. I said that I was not able to stay alone in the house of my father-in-law. Kedaranath's nanny came to stay at his father-in-law's house to care for him, and he was accepted there just like a family member. His maternal grandfather subsequently died at Bhavanipura, where he had gone after his fortunes had utterly failed. Oh, so this is the end of his maternal grandfather, who was very rich, who was arranging all these big festivals in the early lives of Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. So finally he left his body at Bhavanipura after his fortunes vanished. Thereafter we went to Kolkata by boat to spend some time in nearby Bhavanipur. In those days, Kolkata was a fearful place. Yeah, you see, that's why all the gods, right? Immediately upon arriving, my nose was assailed by a severe foul smell. This stench took away my appetite. After residing in Bhavanipura for a few days, we visited numerous places in Kolkata and Bhavanipura. We saw Kali Ghat, where goddess Kali is worshipped. Being exceedingly disgusted, I was not able to appreciate anything. When we returned to Ula, I was the first to leave. Upon arriving in Ula, Mahesh Datta, Mejamami, and her brother Raja Babu performed Shraddha, the funeral rites for my grandfather and her brother Raja. So I'm guessing this is the maternal uncles here. Ula, Mahesh Datta, Mejamami, and her brother. Okay, Mejamami is a girl, a woman, and her brother Raja Babu performed Shraddha. Mahesh Dada, I'm not sure who that is. I forgot if we heard it, but Mejamami and her brother Raja Babu must be her maternal, Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākur's maternal aunt and maternal uncle. Performed Shraddha, the funeral rites for my grandfather. Kedarnath then returned to Ula and tried to manage the shambles of his grandfather's estate. He was not well suited to do it, being young and inexperienced, but by various means family debts were paid off. So he managed to clear off his mother's grandfather. Yes, because there was no heir, right? All the son died. No, wait a second here. Okay, I'm wrong. Because, as we remembered, okay, I have a blank here. Which grandfather had lost all his sons and then got remarried and did not get any children? Was it his maternal grandfather or his paternal grandfather? If it's the maternal grandfather, then I'm wrong to say that Major Mami and her brother were his maternal aunt and uncle. Maybe I'll figure it out, or if you've remembered nicely, maybe you can comment, put it in the comment. So he returned to Ula and he tried to manage the shambles of his grandfather's estate, so his maternal grandfather, and somehow or other he paid off all the debt. However, it seemed that there was never enough money, and his family experienced suffering on this account, being so much accustomed to a comfortable existence. Yeah, Prabhupada says, and when you're so comfortable, you've got gods, you've got personal medics, you got nannies and all, and you lose all of that, it's very hard, very practically you cannot tolerate. The Ṭhākur recounts, everybody thought that my mother had a lot of money and jewelry. Except for a few properties, all her wealth was lost. At the time my father went to Murashidabad, he took 1,500 rupees from my mother. That money was lost. On another occasion, my father went to extricate one of the sons, Mukherjee, from some difficulty and loaned 2,500 rupees from my mother's family, with the security of jewelry to that end. Most of that money was never repaid. My wedding cost almost 2,000 rupees in those days, Wow. And my mother paid 1,000 rupees of the expenses. In this way, there were numerous expenses and no money remained in my mother's hand. I was in complete anxiety. My grandfather's house was huge. The gods were few, and I was afraid of thieves at nights. I thus gave the gods bamboo rods to carry. In this regard, I was not lax. Lax means like lazy or something. No, not sufficiently strict, severe or careful. Yeah, so lazy and being, so he was, in other words, he was serious about, the guarding properly. When Kedarnath was 14, his maternal uncle, the famous Bengali poet Kashi Prasad Ghosh, okay, maternal uncle. So then, that means that the grandfather who lost everything and had no heirs, who had no sons, must be the paternal uncle, because here we've got one uncle here. So then it could be right that those two personalities above are his other maternal uncle and aunt. So Bengali poet Kashi Prasad Ghosh. No. What am I saying here? Maternal uncle. Yeah, that's it. So basically his mother's brother. Huh? But why was not his mother performing the Shraddha ceremony? Why was it two others? Maybe there has to be a presiding personality over the Shraddha. I'm not so much acquainted with that. Came for the visit. Kashi Prasad was a journalist and the editor of Hindu Intelligencer, a weekly journal. He was a literary luminary of his time, and his home was a meeting place of many famous figures of the Kolkata literary scene. Many aspiring writers came to him to be trained in effective English composition. He counted among his friends the Englishman Major Richardson, commonly known as Shakespeare Richardson, who was a noted author and journalist, as well as having been the aide-de-camp to Lord William Bentinck, who in his time had wielded tremendous influence and power in the development of British affairs in India. Aide-de-camp means like someone who helps you in your camp of war, somehow. I think it has to do with military duties. Kashi Prasad tested the English reading and writing of Kedaranath, was impressed with his intelligence, and gave him a mirror as a prize. Kedaranath's maternal aunt suggested to his mother that he go to Calcutta to pursue his studies. His aunt reasoned with his mother that she would care for him as though he were her own son, and it was thus decided that Kedaranath would go to Calcutta for his education. You see how her mother, she's concerned so much with his education that even though he's the last son, and she has lost 4, she allowed him to go. Arriving in Calcutta after the puja season, Kedaranath stayed in the house of Kashi Prasad. It had very thick pillars and was situated on the northern side of a pond called Heduya. On the banks of the Heduya were the homes of missionaries, the church of Krishna Bandor, Queen's College, and the Bethune School. It was a beautiful and aristocratic section of Kolkata. Kedaranath was enrolled in the Hindu Charitable Institution School. He studied there for 4 years, from 1852 to 1856, constantly reading and studying literature with Ishwara Chandra Nandi, in whom he had great faith. He described that gentleman as truthful, in control of his senses, religious, knowledgeable in the Shastra, and well-spoken. Basically Brahmana by quality. The British were interested in creating a generation of Indians whose native ways could be transformed by education. In a famous education brief written in 1835, Thomas Macaulay put forward his argument. I think this is what Prabhupada often quoted. Forward his argument succinctly, if arrogantly. To sum up what I have said, I think it is clear that we are free to employ our funds as we choose, that we ought to employ them in teaching what is best worth knowing, that English is better worth knowing than Sanskrit or Arabic, that the natives are desirous to be taught English and are not desirous to be taught Sanskrit or Arabic, that neither as the languages of law nor as the languages of religion have the Sanskrit and Arabic any peculiar claim to our encouragement, that it is possible to make natives of this country thoroughly good English scholars, and that to this end our effort ought to be directed. In one point I fully agree with the gentlemen to whose general views I am opposed. I feel with them that it is impossible for us, with our limited means, to attempt to educate the body of people. We must at present do our best to form a class of persons, Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. To that class we may leave it to refine the vernacular dialects of the country, to enrich those dialects with terms of science borrowed from our Western nomenclature, and to render them by degrees fit vehicles for conveying knowledge to the great mass of the population. So just see how they were thinking, us ourselves, we can do the big job. But if we get a group of educated Indian that are being westernized, they're going to do the job for us. And Prabhupada clearly say, what is his name? A big political leader in India. I've forgotten. Anyway, so this is exactly what happened. Indians that were convinced that the Western ways were better, England, everything English is good, everything Indian is bad. They made the work even more efficiently than the Britishers themselves. Many Indians began to take advantage of this policy, but it was ultimately to be one of the major factors in the undoing of the British Raj, as the very intellectuals produced by British education were to later establish an independent movement that drove the British from India. So it went both sides. Sorry. During the annual examination, Kedaranath won first prize and obtained a medal. In his first year there, however, during the rainy season, the boy fell sick with blood dysentery, fever, itching skin. Becoming very weak, he returned with some residents to Ula for a visit to his home. Can you imagine the mother? How anxious she must have been. Thinking that my son's all dying. As soon as she sees that, she must think, okay, he's going to die too. Since his illness was complicated, his mother spoke to a leather worker who said he knew a fakir. Is it leather? Leather worker, is it? Who said he knew a fakir who could cure him. A fakir named Chanda arrived. Using bakash leaves, he performed an exorcism and gave Kedaranath gura leaves to eat. He gave Kedaranath a mantra to chant and told his mother to feed him only vegetables and rice cooked with ripe tamarind in particular. He told Kedaranath that in a dream something would be revealed. A dream came to Kedaranath in which a black snake crawled out of his body. The fakir was satisfied that Kedaranath was out of danger. Just see, very powerful man of knowledge concerning, all these tantric ways of curing people and all. He told him to continue with the mantra and to never eat any demigod prasadam. The fakir then took him to his guru, a former cobbler, whose name was Golok. Golok belonged to a branch of the Karta Bhaja sect. This particular group accepts the moral restrictions of strict Vaishnavism, but their eclectic beliefs and philosophical conclusions are ultimately impersonal. Yeah, it's a bit similar to this, what are they called? There are some Mayavadis in India that worship Radha Krishna and so on. They also wear the tilak, like that Vaishnava, but they're actually impersonalists. Of course, they're pretty much cheetahs. Not pretty much, they are cheetahs. For they think the formless absolute to be the highest manifestation of transcendence. Nevertheless, the Guru had many supernatural powers and Kedaranath was impressed by him. The Guru assured Kedaranath that his itching, as well as all the symptoms of his other diseases, would be completely eradicated. In a subsequent dream, calcium powder was prescribed as the treatment for the sores, and in no time the ailment cleared up. Kedaranath's body filled out and became healthy again. He continued chanting the mantras given to him and often went to see this Guru. One day the Guru predicted that Kedaranath's boyhood home, Ula, would soon be almost entirely destroyed. The people there would die from fever and disease. He also predicted that Kedaranath would become a great Vaishnava. Both predictions would prove to be true. After this impressive recovery, he took his mother and sister to Kolkata and arranged a marriage for his sister. Then his mother and sister returned to Ula. Kedaranath studied all of the books in Kashi Prasad's library and assisted Kashi Prasad by reading to him all the articles which were submitted for publication in his magazines and newspapers. He also availed himself freely of the public library. He began to contribute articles to the Literary Gazette and the Intelligencer, which were edited by Kashi Prasad, and began the composition of the first 2 books of the Poriade, an epic poem which he intended to complete in 12 volumes. These 2 books were completed before he turned 18. He joined various debating clubs and freely exchanged thoughts on spiritual and literary topics with Krishnadas Pal, Devendranath Tagore, and his 2 sons, Vijendranath Tagore, who Kedaranath came to count as his closest friend, and Satyendranath Tagore, brother of the poet Rabindranath Tagore, as well as many other figures who later became famous in different spheres of influence. About Vijendranath Tagore, Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura recalls, the Honorable Vijendranath Tagore was the older brother of my friend Shri Yukta Satyendranath Tagore, and my older brother as well. If ever among men there was a close friend, then Barodada, older brother, is that close friend. He was charitable, of good character, pure-hearted and honest, and my heart was enlivened by him. Upon seeing him, all my troubles would go away. In his association, Kedaranath studied the works of many Western philosophers, as well as the controversial views of the Brahma Samaj, led by Ram Mohan Rai, which were promulgated by the Tagore family. Kedaranath also met regularly with an open-hearted Christian missionary named Reverend Duff, and had frequent discussions with him and read many books in his association. He also studied the works of Addison and Edward Young in the association of another missionary named Reverend Greaves. So that's it. I think we'll stop here. I do not know if you have time tomorrow during the day. Maybe I could give this class at 1 p.m. Singapore time to not overlap the Sunday class lecture that will occur. I have yet to make my mind. So okay, thank you very much. It's a very interesting. We are at page 34. From what I see, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. It ends about here, because after that is appendix and all. I think this is going to be a 5, maybe 6 part lectures. I mean, not lectures, we're pretty much reading together. So thank you for joining us. Question by Gianni Prabhu. When we hear or read the glories of pure devotees, is as purifying as reading the pastime of the Lord Himself, right? Yes, there's no distinction. This is why Srimad Bhagavatam is mainly the pastimes of the pure devotees. If you make a comparison, of course the 10th canto is very voluminous, so this is Krishna only. But I mean, there's so much pastimes of the pure devotee. Anything that is purely spiritual, if you describe, if you speak, it's considered as Krishna Katha. There's 2 types of Krishna Katha. There's about Krishna and from Krishna. But about Krishna means also Tadiya, Krishna Tadiya. Everything related to Krishna is also Krishna. So the pure devotees, definitely. Why we like to hear this? We didn't hear much devotional topics yet. We've only hearing like the life of Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura so far. We only heard, okay, he started to chant Ram, he heard a bit of Mahabharata, Ramayana, but except that, not much. So how come is it we're interested? Because it's not the life of a mundane personality. It's the life of a pure devotee of the Lord, and therefore it's enlivening. We like to read that, even though so far there's not much manifested pastime as an acharya that has been spoken of yet. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for joining. For all of you who've lasted until the end, thank you. And we will begin that again. We'll try tomorrow. That would be nice if we can do that. Okay? Thank you. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo. Anantakudi Vaishnavendra ki jai. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Nitai Go Premanande. Hari Hari Go.